All right, thanks everyone for coming. I always like to start my presentations with like a show of hands to wake people up after lunch. So can you raise your hand if you've ever used open source software? Right, pretty much everyone. Have you ever found a bug in open source software? Yeah, pretty much everyone. Have you ever reported a bug in open source software? No? Half or so, a bit more. And have you ever fixed a bug in open source software? Oh, quite a good number. Okay. For those that don't know me, my name is Phil Webb. I primarily work on a project called Spring Boot. And Spring Boot was released in April of 2014, which is quite a while ago. So, I mean, you can kind of think of me as somewhat of an expert when it comes to bug fixing. In fact, the Spring Boot repository, at the time I put this talk together, had 4,395 closed bugs, 4,395, which kind of makes me something of a bug maker myself as well. But my thought process for this went, I've been fixing bugs a long time, and then I looked at the number and I thought, I've been making bugs a long time. So what we're going to do in this talk is we're going to look at what is a bug, my definition at least for this talk, what is debugging. We're going to spend a bit of time about how you should report a bug, which I think is both relevant for open source and for your own projects as well, internal projects. And then we're going to spend the last half of the talk kind of looking through the issue tracker and finding interesting issues and looking at the way that we solved them. And hopefully the techniques that we use there will be some sort of lessons that you can take and use in your own projects. And just as a bit of a disclaimer, all the stuff we're looking at here is like real issues raised by real people. We're not trying to like pick on anyone or point out silly mistakes that they've made. Everyone has off days, and we're not trying to do that. That's not the point of this talk. Okay, so what do I mean by a bug? I think most people kind of think of a bug as like catastrophic failure, something's gone wrong. But that's certainly true, and crash is probably like the most common type of bug that you kind of think of. But there are many more that have come up over the like 10 years of Spring Boot. For instance, performance issues, things that work, but they now don't work as fast as they used to, or memory issues, things that used to work well in a small environment now don't, or environment-specific issues where things used to work on Windows and now they don't, or maybe a combination of all of them. Something works well, except if you put it in some kind of Docker container with limited memory, and then a memory issue and a performance issue happens. Or it might be an upgrade issue. Something's working fine, and then you upgrade some external tool that the thing uses, you upgrade your OS, and again, you get like a bug that appears that hadn't been there previously. And what do I mean by debugging? I think there's a tendency to think of like breakpoints and stepping through. We're going to cover that a little bit, but for this talk, I mean like any technique that helps you remove a bug. I'd like to talk a little bit about reporting bugs. So I think if you're talking about like open source projects, there's kind of these two camps of open source projects. You've got someone who's got a side project, someone who's done something, thought it would be fun to open source it. And then you've got the kind of stuff that I work on, commercial open source, where there's a company behind it and people are actually paid to work on it. And if you're on a side project, you're probably like thinking to yourself when you get issue reports like, why am I giving this away for free? Why did I start this project? And I guarantee even on a commercial project, there's someone in the company that's counting beans and asking very similar questions, like why are we giving this away for free? Why are we doing it for nothing? So the net result of this is whoever is dealing with your bugs probably doesn't have as much time as you think they do. So there's 3 R's that I like to think of when it comes to reporting issues. You've got reproduce, you've got report, and you've got repair. And I'm going to go through all 3 of these. start with reproduce. So what we really, really want when we get a bug report is like a GitHub project or a zip file that reproduces the issue. We want that project to be as small as possible. We don't need your real thing. We want as few moving parts as possible. Ideally in the same language as the project's written in. So for us, we're primarily written in Java. So unless it's a bug that's like when you're using a different language that appears, try and write your samples in the same language. It's just one less moving part. Try not to use Lombok if you can help it, and we can just run it without any extra tooling. And always use the latest patch version of a supported version. So most software comes in like major, minor, patch. I like to think of it as like major's like a major pain in the butt to upgrade, minor is like a minor pain in the butt, and patch should be like there's no butt pain whatsoever with the patch. So when you talk about supported version, we're normally talking about major and minor. And for the patch version, we just want the latest version of that because that's the version that's most likely to have the fix already in, or the version that we're most likely to want to use when we're trying to reproduce the problem and fix it. For Spring Boot, if you go to spring.io and look at the projects page, each of them has this support page, which will give you which versions are supported and when they go end of life, and if you've got a commercial contract with us, like how much the extended support is. So in this case, you can see we've got like 3.4 and 3.3 that are currently open source supported. 3.5 is not yet released, and 3.2 downwards have gone out of open source support. You can also use initializer, start.spring.io, which is a great way to kind of build the project that your reporting project. It just lets you create the Maven and source folders and stuff like that. One of us is going to be the problem. So when it comes to like reproducing the bug, it's a good idea to do it because it kind of proves that the problem is like me. And remember, I don't have time. So if you can prove that it's me, it's one less thing for me to worry about. Here's an example of that from the issue tracker. So this person was upgrading from 2.7, and I'm going to like put up a load of these like screenshots from the issue tracker. You don't have to read them or anything. It's just to kind of give you a feel for them. So there's quite a long issue here, but I'm upgrading. Something's gone wrong. And Brian's gone back and said, could you please provide a sample that fails with 3.3 but works with 2.7? And this person's gone away, started to create that reproducer, and then said, I noticed that my application was using bootstrap configuration, not auto configuration. My bad, ha ha. So Brian said, thanks for letting us know. So you can see sometimes just the act of sitting down and trying to reproduce the problem helps you identify an issue that might be in your code and not the project. So when it comes to reporting an issue, most open source projects will want the following things, like a full stack trace if you've got one, the versions that were being used, and any logs that you can give us. And the nice thing about the reproducer is it kind of gives us this information. So we don't need to ask for it. It's like it's there in the app, and we can get the logs and we can debug things. The other recommendation I have is learn how to format your text on your issue reports. So if you're using one of the kind of big three issue trackers, Jira supports something called Jira Markup. GitHub has got GitHub flavor markdown, and Bugzilla has got like a plugin system, so it depends on which instance you use as to what you can support. But if we look at these two, there's like two pieces of markup that you really need to learn. I recommend trying to learn more, but these two will get you a long way. The first is if you want to do inline monospace text. So with Jira, it's like two little squiggles, and with GitHub Markdown, it's backticks, and that will give you like text that looks like this. And if you want to do a block of text, for Jira, you want to put like no format around it, and for GitHub, you can do 3 backticks, and that will give you a block of text that looks like this. If you are writing Java code, you're probably very used to writing annotations. And Java, in their wisdom, use the @ symbol for annotations. And GitHub, in their wisdom, use the @ symbol to mean notify the person with this username. So if you don't put backticks around @bean, then this user will get an email about it. And this user joined in 2014, the same year as Spring Boot was released. I've got no idea who they are. No activity. So for 10 years, we've been spamming this person. And I think we all know who Bean might be. Another tip, if you're on GitHub and you want to fix the markup, you can click on these little 3 dots and there's an edit button, which is tremendously useful if you kind of mess it up. Okay, let's move on to repairing. So for this latter half of the talk, I want to talk about a day in the life of an open source developer, and you probably imagine it's something like this, infinite amount of time and energy. The reality is it's kind of more like this. So we're gonna go back and we're gonna look at highlights from 10 years of the issue tracker. Each of this little section is going to start with a bug number and something that we can learn from it. So this is the issue number, some lesson, and then if you want to go and dig into the issue, if you feel like looking at the actual source of the problem, you can convert it into a URL like this. Okay, let's get started with 26732. So this is, when is this, 2021 this issue was raised? I think I picked it because it's a kind of good first issue to have a look at. This person's given us a nice description of the problem, right? They've told us the version, that's also great. They've given us a way to reproduce it, not as good as if they'd given us a GitHub project or a zip file, but pretty good. They've given us a full stack trace, just what we want. And they've even gone as far as pointing out the area of the code that they think is the problem. As a little aside, if you're using GitHub, you probably know you can kind of browse code on GitHub. And if you click on the little ruler, the line number in the side, you can highlight a line of code. A lot of people know that. If you press Shift, you can highlight a block, which is useful. But even more useful is if you press the Y button, then what will happen is you can see we're on main here. If you press Y, it'll go to the particular SHA at the time that you're looking at this thing. And that'll give you a permalink. So you can paste that link in, and then if the code moves on, if someone changes the header and adds an extra line, your link still kind of works because it's at the point in time that you linked it and not the current code, with things shifted around. GitHub's also, it's really, really flexible, which is great, but it also means that each open source project probably has their own way of doing things, but the sidebar often gives you a clue as to what's going on with the issue. So for Spring Boot, at least, we have an assignee, which is the person who's actively looking at it or thinking of looking at it or fixed it. So if it hasn't got an assignee, that means that someone hasn't picked it up yet, or anyone on the team can take it on, or you could take it on. We have labels, so we have an issue type, so we have bug, or in this case it was a regression, which means it was something that worked and then it didn't, so a bug we've introduced. And then we have the milestone that it was fixed in. So what we like to do is fix our bugs in kind of the earliest supported version and then forward merge the fix. So if you see a fix like this, it doesn't mean that it's not fixed in your version. It could be fixed in 2.6 as well, and we'll raise a duplicate issue for those as we forward merge. Here's the fix. So I fixed it, and I pushed a commit. And you can see here, GitHub has very helpfully closed this issue on my behalf and given me a link to the commit message. And if you format your commit messages with fixes and then an issue number, there's various different formats, but we use GH- and then the number, then GitHub will see that when it gets pushed to main and close the issues. I want to talk a little bit about the Git commit messages as well. It's very, very helpful to have useful commit messages. So this is a famous quote for like always code as if the person who maintains your code will be a violent psychopath who knows where you live. But I think you can also like slightly adapt it to commit messages. Always write commit messages like you're just a very forgetful version of your future self. So for boot, at least, we try and have like a single line that gives us a description, and then a very detailed commit message about what the problem is, and then a link to the issue number so that we can track back. The reason I think that's very helpful when it comes to debugging is that you can use git blame, and then you can see when you're looking at a piece of code why a line number was added. And if you don't have good commit messages, that's not a very helpful debugging tool. But if you have good commit messages, it can be a tremendously useful debugging tool. So 26633, stack traces and tests. This one was 2021, and we've got an empty value for the Spring data source password can cause null pointer exception. And they've provided a complete stack trace, which is what we want. The full thing, again, like don't truncate it, we need the whole thing. So I've got a little video here that shows how I would typically use that stack trace in my IDE. So what I'm doing here is I'm going back through the issue, and I'm going to copy the stack trace, and then I'm going to go to my IDE. So here I've, in order to recreate this, I've had to use like an older version. So I've just got a project that reproduces it, and I've pulled in the dependencies that I need to get the dependencies at the right level. I'm copying this stack trace, and then in Eclipse you can do this thing where you can open a new stack trace console, and you can just paste your stack trace in. If you're using IntelliJ, there's a similar feature available, but you need to get a plugin for it. And what that gives you is like clickable stack links, which is great. So here I can see immediately, okay, this is the cause of the problem. That's not me. Let's work up. This looks like it's probably where the thing started. That means that this password is probably coming in as null somewhere, and I can work through the stack trace. I can see here the convert from string method is probably the problem, and here's where I'm probably passing in null, and I can work through here, okay, that's probably the cause of the null pointer exception. That's probably the thing that gave me the null. This one was fixed by Stefan. He just says, thanks very much. Here's the commit that went in and fixed it. So what have we got here? Basically 2 lines extra to fix the issue. The important thing here is with this issue, as you can see, there's more than just those 2 lines, because Stefan also added like 4 tests for this. And this is another good technique that is a nice habit to get into, especially if you're on a project that's got longevity. Whenever we try and fix an issue like this, we try and reproduce it in tests first, then fix it, and then commit the tests with the project, because that gives us the confidence that we're not going to reintroduce this bug later. (44137). This one was very recent, and I picked it because it was recent. I'd gone through this process not so long ago. So we're talking here about a problem with banners. So Spring Boot allows you to put a banner.txt file in your resources. And in that text file, you can have these little placeholders, $, squiggle, and then you can say like springboot.version, and that will put the Spring Boot version you're using. And that's a Spring Framework syntax that we use. And Spring Framework supports fallbacks. So you can put colon and then the thing to use if we didn't find that property. And what was happening was in this version of Spring Boot, the fallback wasn't working. So I've got another video here. This is me trying to sort of debug this problem. So I'm going to start by taking the test that Andy's written, and I've put that into the code without the fix that Andy wrote. So this is just to reproduce the problem. I can see here I've got like the assertion error. So I'm reading a banner. it's got this fallback for Spring Boot version and it's not working. I'm going to dig through the code now and try and work out like a good place to start. And this print banner method looks like a sensible place for me to kind of start my journey. So I'm going to put a breakpoint on this method. I'm going to step over this and I can see that I've got some kind of banner text. So that seems to be working. I've got the things with the fallback. It's going through, resolving some placeholders, and then I can see the output here is missing the things that I expect. I expected those fallbacks, they're not there. What I'm going to do here is drop to frame, which is like an undo button for debugging, and that's going to take me back to where I was, and then I'm going to go through this again, and I want to go a bit further and try and find out where in this code things are actually going wrong. So I've got some helper object here. I don't think I need to worry about that particularly. Do resolve placeholder sounds promising. It's going off to the helper. I'm in some Java code. This is annoying. Most IDEs have this thing called step filtering, where you can like say, I don't want to go into certain things. And by default, it's normally the JVM. So I'm going to turn that on so I don't end up jumping into Java code. Doing some assertions, parsing some strings and doing a placeholder. And this looks like an important method. Parse value.resolve, so I'm digging into this again, and then this resolve all looks interesting, and it looks like I've got like an array of something, and it looks like that might be from the text that came in. So I've got like part of the text, and yeah, there's my like values. So that it looks like resolve all is where I need to go. So I'm going to step into that. Building a string result. So this is probably the start of the resolving stuff. It looks like text parts just go out, so that's not that interesting. The next part I've got is a value placeholder. So this does look interesting. And at this point, I'm getting a bit nervous because I've been doing this a while, and I'm worried that if I accidentally click the wrong button, things are going to go wrong. So I'm going to stop and put another breakpoint on. And I'm going to turn off my initial breakpoint so that I can rerun this application and get immediately to where I think the problem lies. Otherwise, I don't want to go through this process every time I start the app. So I'm going to do that. And let's debug this again. Jump into the right place. That looks good. Now, I've got some variables here that are coming in. And the first one is this A thing, which I'm not interested in. This is the one I'm interested in. So I'm gonna, I want to make this easy for me to run multiple times. I'm going to put a hit count on this. And what this is going to do is only hit that debug point when it's the second time round. So that's a useful way of kind of getting me straight back to where I want to be. In all honesty, I don't use hit counts very much. I tend to use conditional breakpoints more. So for conditional breakpoints, you can stop when some condition is met. I can't remember what I'm stopping on at the moment, so I'm going to do another little trick that I like, which is you can do sysouts in the condition and then say don't stop. And then I'm going to run this app again, and it's going to debug it, but nothing stops. But I'm going to use that trick to get text out, and then I know, okay, that is actually what I want to breakpoint on. So I'm going to make that the condition. And I'm going to run this again, and that should hopefully get me straight to where I want to be. So this is the Spring Boot version, and now we can kind of carry on and see if we can work out where the bug lies like further down. So it looks like we have some text, and we're doing this resolve recursively thing. Step over that. It doesn't look very interesting. Resolver. Here we go. This looks like it might be the thing we want. We're getting a particular key, and we're going through these property source things. It looks like this is an array, so we have a bunch of these. So that looks promising. And it looks like it's going to go through each one in turn and get the value out, and then say if the value is not null, we're going to return something. So that's probably where I want to be. So I'll put a breakpoint there and jump through the rest of the loop. And then I can see it's kind of returning something. And indeed, the Spring Boot version is in the key, and the value is an empty string, which is not what we want. We want it to return null. So I'm going to try and work out where the source is for this now. It looks like it's a hash map that's got all these things in a map property source. So I want to find out now what's populated this property source. So I'm going to go to the map property source type. I'm going to put a breakpoint on the constructor, because this is where we're actually putting the data in this thing. I make that conditional, and I'm going to say only stop here if the map that you've given me has got this springboot.version key that we know is incorrect. What am I going to do now? Run this again. Right, we're in the map property source this time, and I can see that the source has indeed got that kind of incorrect value. And now I can step up the stack to try and work out what put that thing in the source. I'm going to do that drop to frame trick again to get me debugging, step into this, and then this looks like useful. This get version string is where we're actually putting the value in. And here's my problem. I can see that the version is returning an empty string. So I'm going to put a breakpoint on that, disable my other ones, and then see if we can actually get to the point where we can prove that this is the bug. So what I'm going to do here is put another breakpoint on my test, because I want to just look at the result. And I'm going to try and trick the Java system into fixing the bug without actually fixing it. So I'm going to turn off step filtering so that I can jump into the map code. And then here I can see this is where it's putting the value into the map. And I know that the value is an empty string. And I think if the code put null in, everything would work. So I'm going to change the value as I'm going and put a null in. I'm going to do that for this one, and I'm going to do it for the Spring Boot version. Just change the value before it gets a chance to get put into the map. Call it null, carry on. And then I'm going to skip through the rest of them because they're not used. So we've got the banner text, that looks good. And in this, so our test has passed. So we know now that if we fix the code to put nulls in instead of empty strings, it's probably going to fix our bug. And that is indeed what Andy's describing here. Here's the fix that went in, and again, you can see the very detailed commit message that Andy wrote. And I didn't put the code fix in because it's there's more to it than what I showed, but if you want to go and have a look at that issue, you can see the actual commit code that went in. Okay, 42317, debugging without a debugger. So this person has raised an issue, and they actually raised two issues. They raised an issue, and we said, we don't think this is our bug, and we closed the issue. And then they raised another issue saying, hey, you closed that issue, and I think you shouldn't have done, so I'm reopening it. We don't really like that. We'd rather you just comment on it. Andy's come back and said, okay, we think this is a problem with this Spring Doc project, which is not maintained by us. It's not maintained by anyone in the Spring Source team. So please go and report it to them. And they've said, okay. Then they've said, well, I think it's a Spring Boot problem, so please, can you fix it? So Andy's come back and said, well, if it's a Spring Boot problem and it doesn't involve this other project, could you possibly create a sample that reproduces the problem without this other project? And the person's come back again with a bunch of text that we can copy paste. And he's gone back to them again, trying to persuade them to give us a zip file. Suggested they use the start.spring.io site. Person's given us a link to a Stack Overflow question. And then finally we get a demo that explains what's going on with this person. Only this demo has still got all the Spring Doc stuff in. So Andy's gone back again and said, could you please try and strip out that? And then we get another response from them. And at this point, it's kind of getting obvious that we're almost spending more time trying to guide them through the process than if we just took a look. So at this point, I decided it's worth trying to investigate what's causing the problem. And the reason I put this one in is because I ran their sample, but I didn't debug it. I just was able to get some answers by looking at code. So I'll show you what I did. So I've got this is the issue report. I've got their sample here. I'm just going to have a quick look. So it's using a Kotlin build file. It's got this So it looks like it's using WebFlux and it's using Spring-Doc OpenAI WebFlux API. So that is probably where the problem lies, I think, at this point. I'm going to run this project, see if I can get the sample to work. It does. And I'm going to curl it. And what I've got here is a curl command that's setting the forward header that this person thinks should work, and it's not working. So the forward prefix is going in, but the location header that you can see where I'm just highlighting here has not got that prefix. It's not got that BFF prefix. So, okay, that's working. First thing I do then is, like, let's go and have a look at what this thing's doing. I bet it's not passing in the right header, is my initial thought process here. And I know it's probably going to call the set location method because it's using a netty. And I find the one, and it does indeed call set location, and it does look like it's doing the right thing. So maybe it's not a Spring-Doc problem. I'm not totally convinced it's our problem, but it's maybe not a Spring-Doc problem after all. They did tell us that it works when they're using native headers and the native heading processor and not the Spring framework version. So I know they're probably using this native setting. I'm going to hunt through the code to find out where we use that. I know they're using netty, so this is probably the bit of code that's making use of that. And it looks like this is just returning a Boolean that's setting that on or off. I'm digging through some more code to find out where that's used. That seems to be used when we create the server, and that is setting up this forward header handler, which isn't our code. It's in React to Netty. And the interesting thing here is, like, almost immediately I can see that this forward header prefix thing that the person wants to use isn't actually in that list of constants there. So I suspect that the problem is with React to Netty. And a bit of digging, and I find out that this issue has actually been raised before. So I open a new issue in React to Netty and say, have you considered supporting this? And it had been raised previously, but now it's come up again. And then within, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks, there was a fix that actually went in and they added support for the forward header prefix thing. Um, 405 is a really old one. Unexpected localization failures. So when we first started working on Spring Boot, the team, Spring is like distributed around the globe, but we happened to have no one that had yet tried to build the project in France. And as soon as they checked out the code, they got an error because one of the tests failed. The fix turned out to be like pretty straightforward. I think it was like a period versus a comma that's used depending on the locale. And we also added a test to make sure that it didn't come back again. Oh no, sorry, this is me fixing the test so that it's setting the locale to use. This is another example, 37648, similar sort of issue with localization. Now bear in mind that we've edited this title, but at the time we didn't know what the problem was. This person's come and said, Docker JSON parsing fails for certain locales. And Scott's tried to have a go, like guiding this person, suggesting maybe they use a specific version, maybe they've changed the JSON. The person's asking, like, what version should I use? And try this version, we've got it working with that before. The output format didn't change with that version, so that doesn't seem to be the problem. I'm trying to guide them as well and suggest that maybe they put some breakpoints on here and see if we can work out what's going on. I'm convinced that this shouldn't be possible to happen. I don't know what's going on. And then someone randomly, helpfully, like pops up from the community and says, I think I found the problem, which turns out that if you have like an I, in most locales it gets changed to like a little lowercase I with a dot, but in Turkish it gets changed to a different character. So if you're in Turkey, and only Turkey, this bug will occur for you. That is indeed the problem. Maritz pops up now and is able to reproduce the problem in kind of a simple test. And then the fix turns out to be like one line of change. Make sure that Jackson is using the English locale when it's doing this conversion. 43864. This is, I picked this one. It is not a bug that was reported. It was an enhancement that I was working on. And I was working on something, we have structured logging support in Spring Boot, which allows you to put like JSON logging output. And it was almost complete, but not quite. We only needed to add a feature to let us do stack trace processing. I was working quite late on it, and I had been through like several rounds, built it many times locally, ran all the tests locally, and then pushed it to production. This is my commit. And it failed. But it failed in an interesting way because you can see the green is Linux. So if you were running this build on Linux or Mac, it would work. On Windows, we have a CI system that also runs on Windows to catch these kind of problems. It failed. I had a go at fixing it. If you're using AssertJ, there's these very helpful methods that allow you to do is equal to normalizing new lines. Because typically, the problem with Windows is new lines or slashes. It's like one of those two things 90% of the times. Because Linux uses like carriage return and Windows uses new line carriage return or new carriage return new line, I don't know. Linux uses forward slashes for paths and Windows uses backslashes. I thought I'd fixed it, but I didn't. So Andy had to step in because I'd gone to bed and he finally fixed it for real. And then that was the problem solved. And if you think the problems can only happen in that direction, you're wrong. Here's an example from way back. When we used to start Spring Boot, we would display the host name of the system you were on. And for some reason on Macs, it was a well-known issue that this could be very, very slow, and only on Macs and only in certain versions of the Mac. So what we did here was we put like a fix in that recorded how long it took to resolve the host name. And then if it seemed like it was taking a long time, and if the user had the OS property set to Mac, then we kind of tried to give people a hint that they probably ought to put something in their host file to make it quick. Okay, 42012 is, what was this? Hang on. No, sorry. Yeah, it's a problem with animations. Logs and remote debugging. Okay. Spring Boot allows you to have Uber jars, which are jar files with all your code and all the dependencies that you need. And you can do java-jar and they just run. And Spring Boot has been through 3 iterations of the code that tries to support this. And this was a bug that appeared with the 3rd iteration. And it was jar launching fails when you've got large files. So we immediately have a bit of a problem here because I've asked this, Andy's come back and said, okay, well, the jar size could be the problem. Can you share something? And like, legitimately, this person is like, I'm having a real hard time reproducing this issue because the jar file is like 2 gig. So even if it didn't contain company information, which it does, I can't really share a 2 gig file on GitHub because it's probably going to blow it up. So I've come back and said, okay, you can try turning on this -d loader.debug equals true setting. Because we've been through 3 rewrites of this thing, we had a fairly good idea that we might hit some problems with this code. So one of the things that we did was put in kind of low-level logging into the loader code. And we couldn't use an actual logging framework because this stuff happens like before any other code is bootstrapped. So I put in this, this code. This is a technique that you can actually find if you go digging through Java itself, the JDK code. You can see, like, here's an example in URL class path where there's some system property, like hidden thing that Java itself is using to get extra debug information out, presumably when they were writing their own code. It's a helpful technique. More commonly, you can just use loggers. So if you're writing code that happens like after the main app has started and you know you've got like the logging infrastructure in place, then logging is a good way of doing this. Most well-written libraries and frameworks have a lot more detailed logging that's not shown out of the box. And if you want to switch on specific logging for specific packages, with Spring Boot, you can just change these properties and get more logging. There's also JVM logging, which is kind of useful. This JEP was merged, I don't know when it was merged, Java 9. So there's like xlog settings that you can do when you start your app. This will give you, for instance, tell me when classes are initialized and loaded. That can be helpful as well. So I've then gone back and said, okay, maybe you want to try doing this command. So this is a way of remote debugging. Has anyone used like remote debugging? Remote, yeah. It's kind of, the name's a bit, I guess it is remote. I more often than not don't actually hop across servers when I'm doing it. But you can start your Java app with listing on a particular socket, and then your IDE can connect to that socket, and you can do like step through and debugs and breakpoints and all that kind of stuff on an app that you haven't got the source code for directly. And it's a very useful technique if you don't want to like get to the point of building a project. The two things that you really need are the port number and then suspend. So often you can just do suspend no, like if you're at a point in time, like when the app starts. Because I was debugging the jar stuff here, I didn't want this thing to start until I was ready, so I do suspend Y, and then the app will stop until you attach the IDE. Finally, I managed to reproduce this issue using like I write a little project that generates a jar with a bunch of fat files in it. Here's the reproducer. And it turns out this issue was just a simple integer overflow issue. In Java, integers go from minus to positive. The zip format uses 32-bit value, but it's only positive. So it was just a case of doing some integer dot to unsigned long calls and using a few longs when previously I'd used ints. (40962) test pollution. This one was raised by another Spring team member. And the bug itself is not the important thing here. The important thing here is no good deed goes unpunished. And whilst I was fixing this bug, I saw what I thought was like a nice little easy refactor that would make the code better. And it turned out to break things in an interesting way. So here's a little video of like my thought process here. I'm in the code. And I've added these, well, let's start by running the tests to make sure they're all working. And they are. And I'm going to be working on a particular feature. So I was only running like one test and then another test. Like these two tests were all I needed, so I didn't run the whole thing. So it looks good. And I saw this thing and I'm like, oh, this could be a static final. Why don't I just make that a constant so that it's not, recreating this thing every time. So I did that. And then I was working on the actual bug, and I was running my two tests. Green, great. Run on a different port. Green, great. And then I did a full build. And when I did a full build, the thing fell over. So here you can see, even though I run those tests independently, they're fine. When I run the complete suite of tests, I've got a problem. And the problem turns out to be test pollution. So in this case, what I thought was a sensible and correct change to make, if I look at this code and then like head a bit higher to the abstract base class, which is why I didn't notice it, you can see here there's a couple of volatile fields. and we're setting some stuff up based on the application context that comes in. So because the earlier tests were calling this thing with a different setup, it was setting those volatile fields, and then the second time that test ran, it was picking up the one that was incorrect. Deadlocks and thread dumps. So deadlock is when two threads are trying to, I don't know how to describe it, they're basically forming a cycle. I'm not an expert on deadlocks by any means, Andy is, and he's very, very good at fixing these problems. This one was like a regression that we caused somehow, and there was a Stack Overflow question. I don't think it was even raised as an issue. I think Andy found the Stack Overflow question and then raised his own issue for it. And eventually managed to reproduce it. And then one thing you can do is you can get a thread dump from Java. There's a number of ways of doing it, but normally the most common is to issue a kill-3 if you're on like a Linux star machine, and the process ID, and that'll give you a big wall of text that looks something like that. It's very useful because you can then tell like which threads are blocked on each other, and that's often the only way you can get to the bottom of a deadlock. Andy's found that there was some extra piece that was needed to make this thing actually fail, and the fix itself again turned out to be like 3 lines of code. I don't know how long it took him to actually track it down, but the fix was 3 lines of code. Deadlocks are also really hard to test for, but Andy did manage to write a reproducer for this so that we know that this one's not coming back. Java P. So 42314. This is getting quite specialized, and I'm not sure how many people will need it, but I thought it was an interesting one to highlight. So we've got an issue, and the issue is that something's not working. And I say, I think this is a duplicate of one of these other 2 issues that we've already fixed. And the response we get is, no, because this issue has only got a single constructor, and those other issues were about code that had 2 constructors. The interesting thing is this was something that was written in Kotlin, not Java. So although Kotlin is interesting because obviously it's creating bytecode, and the bytecode that it creates doesn't always map the same way that you would think it would for Java code. And in this case, even though they had a single constructor, what happens is the bytecode had 2 constructors. So if you use, there's a command line tool called Java P. It ships with each version of Java, and you can point it at a class file and it'll kind of decompile it and give you the information that you might find useful. And in this case, you can see that we have indeed got like 2 constructors on the bytecode, even though there was a single constructor on the source code. Uh, 40139 is upgrades suck. So we've got a problem here. Unable to use Docker Compose when mixing dedicated services. Spring Boot calls out to the Docker Compose command line to do some Docker Compose stuff, and then it parses the JSON that comes back from it. So this person's got an issue. Maritz has started to dig into it. He's raised an issue with Docker Compose. This is the Docker Compose issue that he raised. They've come back and said it's already been raised previously, and the problem you've got is you're using the command line in a certain way, and you need to use this -- orphans equals false flag, and then you'll get the behavior you want. So Maritz is like, great, I did the trick. I've added an integration test to prove it works. We're like, everything's great, everything's wonderful. No. So the problem we've done here is we've fixed this bug, but unknown to us, the -- orphans flag was introduced in kind of a later version of Docker Compose, and we documented that we support a particular version that was earlier than that. So we accidentally raised the baseline, and we needed to only change that, add that flag if you were using a certain version of Docker. Here's another example, also kind of Docker related. We have buildpack stuff, and one of the things we do is go in and read the sort of source manifest files that are in some of these Docker images. And all that happened here was something went wrong, and it turns out that for whatever reason, during one Docker upgrade, the format that was in this file changed from tar.gzip to tar plus gzip. I'm sure it was probably in the spec somewhere, and if I'd read the spec, I'd have probably noticed it, but I didn't. I kind of wrote some examples that made it work. So the fix turned out to be kind of pretty straightforward, just protect against these two different things. This happens quite a lot. It's kind of hard to sometimes predict the way that other software will evolve, and you make assumptions without really understanding things. So to summarize, I would say that if you're writing any kind of software of any significance, bugs are just a part of life. They're inevitable. The good news is that I think Java is some of the best debugging tools around. I think the fact that Java runs in a virtual machine gives you all this kind of extra insight that you maybe couldn't get with a standard binary. I think if you're writing high quality software, you should invest the time to write good tests, and also write tests when you fix the issues so that you catch and prevent regressions. And really sort of from an open source maintainer point of view, thank you for everyone that does take the time to raise issue reports. It really does sort of help make the projects better, and we appreciate kind of all the effort that goes into people that take the time to raise issues. And with that, I think I'm done. So thank you very much. I don't know if we want to have any questions. We've got about 8 minutes left. Has anyone got any questions?
Thanks for making it.
I have one, I did do sort of some bonus material, which we can do. This is an old issue that I thought, don't pay developers by line of code.
Especially with robots.
This issue is going back a while, and this person's just saying they're getting a no class def found error. We don't know why. It's some kind of regression, and Andy's digging into it. And Stefan's come back and sort of said, that doesn't reproduce the problem for me. Andy said, it does reproduce the problem if you add H2, like a database thing. And then Andy's finally solved, at least got closer to solving the problem, which is like the introduction of a private method that uses abstract platform transaction manager as a return type, changing it back to the interface type rather than the class prevents the failures. And I don't understand why. Stefan said he's like, the sample still doesn't fail for me. Then we discover it's kind of related to verification, class verifier. We get a native stack trace coming out from this. Someone then helpfully pops up and says, maybe you've got -no verify. And indeed, this was when we were building with Maven, and Stefan had some Maven options set to speed up his compilation, so no verify was why we couldn't reproduce it. So it's taken quite a while just to get to this point. Andy digs in, and he's found out that interfaces are given special treatment. So he's actually gone, and the link there was to some C code, so he's gone and looked through the JVM C code to find out that there is something different that happens for interfaces versus classes. And then finally we get to the bottom of it, and there's a Java language specification that says for assignments, interfaces are treated as objects. So this is actually working as specified. And there's a reproducer that we get. Here's the commit message, which is quite significant. And here's the change that we needed to make to fix the problem. So 2 lines. And probably the best part of like 3 days trying to debug this thing. There's another one that's like, it's kind of interesting. This is a problem that's been open for a while. So 2021, this problem was opened, and we didn't fix it until 2023. So this is sometimes you get problems that are like fundamental flaws, and this is one of those. So this is an exception that happens when you're using signed jars, and it's back in our nested jar support again. It was very hard to fix. I tried many times and failed all of them. In the end, that's one of the things that led to the V3 rewrite of the jar support. And what I want to show you here is like, in order to add V3, we've added 13,906 lines of code and taken away 9,578. So this was a significant amount of work. This didn't fix the bug, but it did rewrite the kind of ground, if you like. And then this is the actual fix that went in. And you can see here that it was like 266 lines added, 17 removed. So sometimes you kind of have to be patient. Quite often with fundamental flaws like that, there's a significant amount of work that goes into kind of rewriting things to make the thing that you want to fix easy. So it's not always, it sometimes is time consuming. And then the last thing, which I'm not going to do, but if you want to do, you can use this command, and this is like git roulette. I was originally going to like get the Spring Boot source code up and run git roulette, and this will pick like one in like of the last 2,000 commits that has fixes in the GitHub issue, and pick one at random, and then show us that commit. And I was going to do it to see if we could to see how confident we were in our commit messages and whether it was going to be like good or bad. But I think given the shortness of time, I decided to skip that one and put it to the end. And I think, yeah, that really is it for now. So thank you very much.